Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 12th of November 2012, the podcast that puts off procrastinating until tomorrow. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's skeletonize the news of the bogus. As this podcast has reported, the efforts by the big media cartels to block file-sharing sites and technologies such as BitTorrent really aren't motivated by lost sales due to so-called piracy. Not only do the industry's own studies show that piracy is either a wash or a net gain for the media companies, their behavior has always been more consistent with trying to shut down alternate modes of distribution for independent artists and filmmakers. Add one more piece of evidence to the pile. The Promo Bay, a sister site to the industry's archenemy, the Pirate Bay, has now been blocked in the UK by court order, even though there isn't the first piece of pirated material on the site. The site is dedicated solely to promoting the works of independent artists and filmmakers who provide the content themselves as a means of gaining attention. According to Promo Bay spokesperson Will Dayble, quote, "These artists are coming from the point of view that free mass exposure, with smart measurement on who likes you where, is more valuable to an artist than trying to scrape money out of iTunes or Beatport or whatever. We can collect tons of cool data and properly measure where the traffic goes. If we're going to truly prove that the industry has changed, that the way we appreciate art has changed, we need to measure it." The Promo Bay was created after the enormous success of promotional efforts the Pirate Bay created for independent filmmakers, artists, and writers to promote themselves on the Pirate Bay's main site. It was so successful that more than 10,000 artists signed up for it in just the first few months, prompting the decision to spin it off as a separate, dedicated site, although the promos on the main site still continue. But now, the Promo Bay has been blocked by UK internet providers as part of the court ruling against the Pirate Bay earlier this year. BT, BE Broadband, and Virgin Media have all set up blocks preventing their users from reaching the promotional site. And BT and Virgin Media both told TechRadar that the domain is included in the list of sites they were ordered to block. Laz K, leader of the UK's Pirate Party, commented on the situation, quote, "This is exactly what we warned would happen. It really illustrates the dangers of web blocking. This censorship was justified by protecting artists and preventing copyright infringement, and is now being used in ways that are directly harmful to independent artists. It's time to put a stop to this. We cannot have private companies in charge of censoring the internet for their own ends." Jim Killick of the Open Rights Group agrees, quote, "Blocking of legitimate websites is unacceptable. The wide blocking order that the courts granted against the Pirate Bay made it likely that this could happen." Folks, this is just the latest in a long line of activity that shows quite clearly that lawmakers and judges all over the world are acting not for the good of the people, but at the behest of big corporations trying to cling on to their outdated 20th century business model at the expense of the people, who would enormously benefit from the creative output of independent artists if only they could finally get an effective means of worldwide content distribution. Ever since the Universal Music Group versus MP3.com case in 2000, even after MP3.com gained the support of many artists such as Alanis Morissette, it's been clear that this is all about stopping artists from having a distribution platform outside that of the big media cartels. And our governments have played right along with them. When will people learn that government does not protect us from corporations? Government is the tool corporations use to profit at our expense. Back in August, we discussed the case of a Michigan boy's hot dog cart that was shut down because it competed with local restaurants. Around the same time, in an unrelated move, the state of North Carolina passed a law repealing a similar act of cronyism, the regulation that required food truck owners to rent space in a restaurant or commissary. But 5 months later, no food vendor has been able to take advantage of it. According to the Mobile Food Vendors Association, most of them don't even know about the new law, and the few that do, and have tried to exercise what is not only their right, but is now perfectly legal in their state, have been stopped by their local health departments. You'd think repealing a law would be pretty straightforward, but no. Some vendors, including Michael King of Salisbury, who operates food trucks as a charity to create jobs for the homeless, were told that their trucks need to meet the same requirements as a commissary, which means, among other things, that they need to install equipment like grease traps or even toilets. Robert Thomason of the Mobile Food Vendors Association asked the state health department what food truck owners can do to comply with the law without having to install a lot of prohibitively expensive and completely unnecessary equipment. He was told to hold off while the health department gets it all straightened out with the Attorney General. Thomason said, quote, "I know the health inspectors and I know how they operate. If you don't spell it out in black and white, then they'll mix in the bathroom. They'll say, you're not a commissary because you don't have a bathroom or you don't have a grease trap or whatever. But it's not practical or necessary. You'd have to set up a whole pressurized system and it would be very expensive." Thomason pointed out that all that would be necessary, and all the health department would have to require, is that they have some place to dump their wastewater, and a simple RV park or truck stop would do. Another problem is that the trucks are supposed to have their own cleaning facilities. Back when they were required to be connected with a restaurant or commissary, that location would serve the purpose. But Thomason says that with food trucks, a simple car wash would suffice, or they could even clean it in their home driveways. Thomason says it's important for vendors to know what's required of them before they plonk down $30,000 for a new truck. Quote, "These people need to know exactly what's expected of them. You have rules and you have laws. Your job is to enforce them exactly to the letter. You can't go out there and say, well, sir, I think you ought to have your hose about 12 feet closer to the door, just because in my professional judgment I think it ought to be that way." You'd think repealing a bad law would be easy. Just let people operate food trucks. But when you have an intrusive, busybody government, it appears that nothing is ever that simple. Good luck to them in their efforts to get government off their backs enough to finally create some jobs and give the people a much desired service. One of the most elusive creatures ever photographed has got to be Bigfoot. Even today, despite the proliferation of high-def cameras on smartphones and becoming the most well-documented society in the history of ever, all we ever know of Bigfoot is a few blurry photos and videos and a couple of elusive footprints. Until now. Bigfoot DNA has been found and sequenced, and this finally proves the existence of the creature. That's what geneticist Melba S. Ketchum found when she... Oh, wait, she's not a geneticist. She must be a molecular biologist. No, wait, What was she now? Oh, she's a veterinarian! Right. Anyway, she and her team at DNA Diagnostics Incorporated conducted a 5-year study of over 100 DNA samples from... what, actually? Don't you have to actually find Bigfoot first in order to get a DNA sample of it? The findings were published in the journal... Oh, wait. They haven't been published at all. Anywhere. Haven't even been submitted for peer review. And no other scientists have been invited to double-check their work. And yet, they're already touting it as a conclusive find. Reminds me of another couple of scientists. Anyone remember Pons and Fleischmann? Their samples are just hair samples found at the site of alleged Bigfoot encounters. And the DNA consists of, get this, mostly human DNA. In fact, the mitochondrial DNA is identical to humans. Wow, what are the chances? It's almost like they just got their hands on some ordinary human hair. But that isn't what Ketchum concluded. Quote, "The genome sequencing shows that Sasquatch mitochondrial DNA is identical to modern Homo sapiens. But Sasquatch nuclear DNA is a novel, unknown hominin related to Homo sapiens and other primate species. Our data indicate that the North American Sasquatch is a hybrid species, the result of males of an unknown hominin species crossing with female Homo sapiens." She concluded that it must be because Bigfoot is a hybrid between a human and another primate, instead of, actual human DNA with some contamination. Or the other way around, animal hairs contaminated with human DNA when they were collected? Ketchum's team is saying nothing about where these specimens were collected, or how, or by whom. How do they know it was left by Bigfoot and not some other animal or human? Ketchum says that Bigfoot is a human offshoot from a primate that bred with human females in North America around 15,000 years ago. Because primates were totally all over North America at the time. Meanwhile, DNA Diagnostics Incorporated has been saddled with an F rating by the Better Business Bureau because, quote, DNA Diagnostics has developed a pattern of complaints and has failed to correct the underlying reasons for complaints. Customers claim to have paid for services that have not been delivered or have not been delivered within a reasonable time. Further, they have not received a refund when services were not provided. According to one customer, quote, "It was one untruth after another. I still haven't received my results or my money. So what is left for me to do? I'm not going to fight with them. I and many others know the truth and that they have shady business practices." It seems as if you send a sample to DNA Diagnostics Incorporated, the one thing you won't get is an actual examination of the DNA. Ketchum has now issued a statement saying that the U.S. government should give Bigfoot protected status as an indigenous people. Unbelievable. Ketchum is also working on a documentary about her discovery. Because that's what all good scientists do before they publish, right? People often ask why skeptics are so closed-minded. Why can't we just say that Bigfoot probably exists? Well, first of all, we aren't closed-minded. We just require proof, like an actual Bigfoot. But think about cases like this. If Bigfoot DNA were to be confirmed, skeptics would accept it. But what if it were falsified? Well, that wouldn't mean that Bigfoot doesn't exist. The skeptic's position is falsifiable. Ketchum's is not. This particular DNA not being Bigfoot's just means that the search goes on. Because, the truth is out there somewhere. Yeah, fine. Get back to us when you finally get it. And now it's time to compel the national interest of this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it's Georgia Congressman Hank Johnson, who called for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would, get this, allow some government restrictions on freedom of speech. Quote, "We need a constitutional amendment that would allow the legislature to control the so-called free speech rights of corporations. They control the media. They control the messages that you get. And these folks are setting up a scenario where they're privatizing every aspect of our lives as we know it. So wake up! Wake up! Let's look at what's happening." Okay, let's look at what's happening. Government is getting bigger and bigger. It's getting more and more intrusive into our lives. We're taxed more, our money is inflated, tens of thousands of pages of federal rules are added every year. So what exactly is happening that is privatizing every aspect of our lives as we know it? That would be a good thing. Back before government meddling, back before the progressive era and the income tax and the Federal Reserve, the poor and the working class were more upwardly mobile than at any point in history, before or since. And that was with the enormous drag of the enslavement and subsequent freeing of a huge portion of the population. People started with nothing, and many became rich, most became well off, and everyone in the economy saw their lot improve. Fast forward to today. Feeling the effects of a housing bubble brought upon by government policies designed to make it easier for the poor to buy homes, plus a financial bubble spurred on by the Federal Reserve, plus government protectionism in the form of Fannie and Freddie, not to mention the bailing out of too-big-to-fail banks and corporations. And we're still stuck at the bottom of the longest recovery since the Great Depression. We have a national debt that's greater than GDP. Small businesses are being obliterated right and left. And bigger corporations are often faced with the choice of moving overseas or closing down entirely. No, it's not true that they're privatizing everything. Exactly the opposite is happening, and that's the cause of most of our problems. And who controls the media? Who passed on the lies about Iraq to get us into the Iraq War when the information proving they were lies was publicly available? Who is still passing on the lies about Iran and Syria to do the same thing, even though reliable, easily accessible, scientifically valid, and independently verified information shows that that's all a pack of lies too? Who assisted the government in marginalizing our choices at the ballot box, giving Gary Johnson only one mention out of every 1,000 for Obama and Romney when their own polls were showing it should have been 6 out of every 100? Who goes along with government again and again and again, passing on the propaganda while giving the illusion of opposing viewpoints, all the while marginalizing and even downright ignoring the real opposing viewpoints, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, or whatever? It's government corporatism that makes the media this way, while actual free market sources online, as well as news sources from other countries, do a much better job of covering these issues. And for that matter, just what is a corporation anyway? You could argue that a corporation is comprised of a lot of assets, such as factories, but factories don't speak, so their freedom of speech is irrelevant. A corporation is a group of people, and those people have free speech rights. To curtail the right of corporations is to curtail the right of the people. This hatred of corporations is because the politicians in the media portray all corporations as being like Exxon or Walmart. But corporations also include small businesses and non-profit organizations. Did you know that the James Randi Educational Foundation is a corporation? It was incorporated in the state of Delaware on the 29th of February 1996. So is the New England Skeptical Society, which produces the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. They incorporated in 1997. Any such group that forms legally becomes a corporation. If you're in favor of this hypothetical amendment, then you're in favor of giving government the power to stop the free speech of the JREF and its members acting on its behalf. You're in favor of giving the government the power to tell the SGU hosts what they can and cannot say in their own podcast. Is that really what you want? This whole thing is just another bogus reaction to the Citizens United case, and yet again, most of what the politicians have said about the case is a pack of lies. Lies once again happily repeated by the news media. The decision does not overturn nor have any effect on the 1907 Tillman Act. It has absolutely nothing to do with political campaign contributions. It had no effect on any campaign contribution limits, and it doesn't do a thing to take away the voice of the people. In fact, it overturned laws that did exactly that. Under McCain-Feingold, for example, groups like the JREF could not have bought television time if they even mentioned the name of a federal candidate 60 days before the election. While the big corporations, especially the ones in the news media, had a virtual monopoly on political discussion on television and radio. How can anyone defend that? No doubt liberals and progressives will be bleating that Hank Johnson is one of the good guys, sticking up for us against the big bad corporations. If they do, they could not be more naive. According to OpenSecrets.org, Johnson got big campaign contributions from Bank of America, Coca-Cola, insurance companies, law firms, and big media, including Comcast, one of the biggest media conglomerates there is. Do you really think that all of a sudden he's turned over a new leaf and is going against his big corporate contributors? Of course, we wouldn't be in this mess to begin with if government weren't creating corporations in the first place. Yes, that's right. Government creates corporations. Incorporation is a method of getting special legal status with the government. Without corporatism, there would be no corporations, only businesses, trusts, and nonprofit groups, and the only effect they would have on your life would be when you voluntarily agree to associate or do business with them. Without fail, laws that are supposed to regulate or restrict or curtail big corporations end up helping those big corporations at the expense of the people. Johnson is not doing this because he cares about you. He's doing this because he knows that this would enable government to restrict competition even further, hurting even more of the small fry and allowing those same big corporations to gain even bigger profits. And everyone who just kowtows to him and goes right along with what he says without understanding the facts deserves to be named biggest Bogon emitter right along with him. And now it's time to put duct tape over the mouth of this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! For years, skeptics have complained about the dishonest and despicable actions of creationists and other woos who engage in false flagging campaigns, where a video on YouTube is repeatedly flagged and subsequently taken down simply because the person was too insulted or in some other way couldn't respond to the criticism. The problem is, now it's happened from one of our own. Melody Hensley is the executive director for the Center of Inquiry DC. She raised the ire of YouTube user Truth in Oblivion, known as the Woolly Bumblebee, after some comments she made on Twitter. Listen to some clips of the video.
Melody Hensley has recently embarked on a preemptive strike on Twitter against anyone she thinks may harass or threaten her. And by threaten or harass, she means anyone who may ask her honest and educated questions that oppose her feminist ideology and misandry. You may ask how she's going about accomplishing this preemptive strike on Twitter. Being well trained in the art of ducking and dodging, as well as possessing the Golden Feminist Survival Tactics badge, she put on her best pink and white military panties with matching combat boots and stormed the followers list from @ElevatorGate's Twitter account. So now she's all in a tizzy because people are calling her out for her mass blocking of people she doesn't even know. One of her tweets was particularly humorous, where she said, quote, "Want to make it more difficult to read tweets," end quote. Just because you block people on Twitter does not mean they can't see your tweets. Apparently, she's unaware as to how Twitter works. Although it's understandable seeing as how Twitter is a bit more complicated than a cappuccino machine. She has also claimed that people following @ElevatorGate are obsessed. However, I find it quite humorous that she would say that after doing what she did. I think the word we're looking for here is irony. CFI has been going downhill for quite some time now, and has made it quite obvious that they don't care for skepticism or rationality. If Melody Hensley is any indication of what CFI considers to be a good representative of their organization, then CFI is going to go the way of the dodo within the atheist and skeptical communities. As for melodramatic Melody, well, she's off to stick her flag on the top of Mount Moaning Victim. Don't worry though, it's more of a small hill than a mountain, because we all know that feminists don't fare well when faced with real challenges when trying to get to the top.
How did Melody respond to this video? Did she refute the arguments? Did she defend her feminism intellectually? Did she show how the video was factually incorrect or logically specious? No, she didn't. She reacted by posting this to her Facebook group. Quote, "Hi friends. I would appreciate it if every one of you would flag this video as bullying. You have to sign into YouTube. If you don't have a YouTube account, they are super easy to create. This means a lot to me. I'm tired of the constant online harassment and bullying. This is too much." Really? That is too much? Just being called out onto the mat is bullying by you? Have you never been on the internet before? Geez, check out the comments on my YouTube channel. That's mild compared to the stuff I get. For crying out loud, if your skin is that thin, then maybe you shouldn't be the head of a prominent skeptic organization. Okay, let me see if I've got this straight. You see someone accusing you of responding to people who attack you with words, with speech, in the marketplace of ideas, by getting them blocked, and your response is to have that person's video flagged? To get it taken down? Boy, you sure showed her, didn't you? I'm trying to be fair here. I'm not familiar with Melody or what she may have been through online. Certainly a lot of people have suffered from genuine problems, including death threats. But none of that was in this video. This video was someone complaining that you respond to criticism by throwing a tizzy and having the person blocked, and you responded to her by throwing a tizzy and trying to block her video. I sure hope you're proud. Bumblebee's video is still up, so apparently she wasn't that successful. By the time this podcast was recorded, Melody had apparently deleted the post, as the link is no longer valid. Maybe she regretted posting it, but it just isn't enough. Once you've put that out there for the world to see, an apology is in order, or at least a retraction. And hey, that whole refuting her arguments thing might not be a bad idea either. It's not too late to do damage control, Melody, but unless you do, responding to an accusation of inappropriate action by engaging in that very same inappropriate action will absolutely get you named this week's Idiot Extraordinaire! Well, that wraps up this hippopotamonstrosesquipedaliaphobic edition of the Bogosity podcast. Please visit the forums at Bogosity.tv where you can read the show notes and join the discussion on these and other subjects. This podcast is free but not free to produce, so please use the donate button at the top of the Bogosity.tv website or down the right-hand side of the podcast page and give generously to keep this podcast going. And if you'd like to contribute to the podcast, just send a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. Put it in an audio file, and if it's good enough, it'll get played right in the podcast. This will be the last regular podcast of 2012, but we'll come back at the end of the year and review all the year's Bogosity, as well as name the 2012 Idiot of the Year. And of course, we'll be back in 2013 with regular podcasts. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Will Dayble. I think the only real difference between a riot and a revolution is the latter is better organized. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported License. Bogosity. Christmas time is coming, and the most classic of Christmas stories is A Christmas Carol. But how much do you know about the original Charles Dickens novella? Have you dismissed it as a children's book with one-dimensional characters amounting to nothing but platitudes and cliches? Maybe your appreciation of the book was even muted by those dry, boring, annotated books they made you read in school. My book, the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, uses both facts and humor to present the book in a way you probably haven't seen it before. Giving praise when deserved and beratement when warranted, this book is put in the perspective of its time and shows a dimensional, multi-layered Ebenezer Scrooge from start to finish. Skepticism, history, and even economics are employed to show the book in relation to today in an easily accessible format. Appreciate the Christmas of your youth all over again. Get the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, available at Amazon and on PDF as well.